Close your eyes. Let the world outside grow quiet. Let the noise of the day fall away like fog lifting off dark water. Tonight, I want to take you somewhere far away, to another time, to a ship crossing the Atlantic in the year 1887, when the ocean was vast and dark and full of things that couldn't quite be explained. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to follow anything too closely. Just let the story carry you, like a ship carried on a deep and gentle current. Are you comfortable? Good. Then let us begin. The story is called The Wreck of the SS Eternity. Her name was Eleanor Ashworth, and she was 31 years old, and she was traveling alone. This, in the autumn of 1887, was not entirely common. A woman without a husband, without a chaperone, without even a maid to carry her luggage, boarding a transatlantic steamship at Southampton dock, with nothing but 2 leather trunks and a very determined expression. The porter who helped her had glanced at her ring finger. Empty. He had glanced at her luggage tags. Miss E. Ashworth, New York City, USA.
He had glanced at her face, composed, pale, with gray eyes that seemed to be looking at something no one else could see. And he had decided not to ask any questions. This was wise of him. Eleanor did not want questions. She had spent the last 4 months answering questions in London, from solicitors, from her late father's business partners, from well-meaning aunts who smelled of lavender and pity. She had answered every single one of them with patience and precision and a smile that did not reach her eyes. And now she was done. Now she was going home, or what she told herself was home. A city she had not lived in since she was 12 years old. New York. Tall and loud and indifferent to grief. It sounded, just now, like exactly the right place. The SS Eternity was a grand ship. Not the grandest. That distinction belonged to the Cunard liners, which Eleanor could not quite afford. But the Eternity was beautiful in its own way. 3 levels of passenger decks, painted white and brass, with a dining saloon that seated 60, and a promenade deck lined with wooden chairs where people sat in wool blankets and watched the sea. It had made the crossing 14 times. This was its 15th. Eleanor found her cabin on the 2nd passenger deck, cabin 14, starboard side. It was modest, a single narrow bed with a blue wool blanket, a small writing desk bolted to the wall, a porthole the size of a dinner plate, looking out at gray September water. She stood in the doorway for a moment, taking it in. Then she stepped inside, set her smaller bag on the bed, and did something she had not done since her father's funeral. She sat down, and she breathed. Just breathed. Outside, she could hear the sounds of the dock, the shouts of sailors, the groan of ropes, the distant bell of the harbor master's boat. Below her, the engines had begun their deep, rhythmic thrum, a sound like a heartbeat, a sound like a lullaby, if you let it be. Eleanor lay back on the narrow bed, still dressed in her gray traveling coat, and closed her eyes. She was asleep before the ship even left the harbor. She did not find the first letter until the next morning. It was early,
The ship had been at sea for nearly 14 hours. Eleanor woke to a cabin full of silver light, the sun coming in gray and soft through the porthole, and the gentle rolling of the ship, which was, she discovered, not entirely unpleasant, like being rocked slowly by very large and indifferent hands. She dressed. She combed her hair. She was reaching for her boots when she noticed it. A small envelope, cream-colored, slightly yellowed at the edges, tucked under the gap at the bottom of her cabin door, as if slipped there in the night. She picked it up. Her name was written on the front. Not Miss Ashworth, not Cabin 14, just Eleanor. In a hand she did not recognize, careful and old-fashioned, the letters slightly too formal, as if whoever had written it had learned penmanship from a very strict governess. She turned it over. No seal, no postmark, no return address. She opened it. Inside was a single card, and on the card, in that same careful hand, were 7 words. Do not go to dinner tonight. W. Eleanor read it twice. Then she set it on the writing desk and stared at it for a long moment. Her first thought was, this is a mistake. Someone slipped it under the wrong door. Her second thought was, but it has my name on it. Her third thought, and this one came with a small, cold shiver that she did not entirely understand, was, no one on this ship knows my name. She went to dinner anyway. Of course she did. Eleanor Ashworth had not traveled 4 months alone in a foreign country and survived 17 meetings with her father's solicitors by being the kind of woman who took mysterious warnings from anonymous strangers. The dining saloon was warm and bright, old dark wood paneling and brass lamps, white tablecloths, and the smell of roasted meat and salt air. About 40 passengers were seated. Eleanor was shown to a small table near the window, set for 1, which she had specifically requested.
She ordered soup. She ordered bread. She opened the novel she had brought, a Gothic story about a house with too many rooms, which she had found, before this voyage, appropriately dramatic, and now found almost embarrassingly relevant. And she began to read. She was 3 pages in when she became aware that someone was watching her. Not in a threatening way. Not exactly. More like the way a person watches someone they recognize, but cannot quite place, with a kind of careful, almost reluctant attention. She looked up. The man was sitting alone, 2 tables away. He was perhaps 35, perhaps 40. It was difficult to say. Dark hair, slightly too long for fashion. A dark coat. He was not eating. There was a glass of water in front of him that he had not touched. And he was looking at her with an expression she could not quite read. Something between recognition and sorrow, and something else. Something that looked almost like relief.
Their eyes met. He looked away immediately, looked down at the table, put one hand over his mouth as if he had said something he regretted. Eleanor looked back at her book, but she did not read another word. The soup arrived. She ate it. The bread arrived. She buttered it slowly, methodically, not tasting it. Outside the portholes, the North Atlantic was dark and deeply invisible. Nothing happened at dinner, nothing unusual at all. Except that when Eleanor finally stirred to leave, she glanced back at the table where the man had been sitting. It was empty. The glass of water was gone. But there was a small cream envelope on her chair, the one she had been sitting in, the one she had occupied for the last 40 minutes. She did not know when it had been placed there. She had not seen him approach. She had not felt anything. She had not heard a sound. Her heart beat once, very hard, and then settled. She picked up the envelope, her name on the front, same handwriting. She tucked it into her coat pocket and walked back to her cabin without looking at anyone. She read it by the light of the small oil lamp on her writing desk. You came to dinner. I'm glad you're all right. I wasn't certain the warning reached you in time. There is something I need to tell you, but I am not certain you will believe me. I am not certain I believe myself. The woman who occupied your cabin on our last crossing, her name was Margaret Fenn. She died at sea. The official report said it was a fever. It was not a fever.
I know, because I saw what happened. I was there. Or I was near there. I cannot explain that part yet. Please don't throw this letter away. There are 7 more days on this crossing. I only need you to listen. W. Eleanor read it 3 times. Then she set it next to the first letter on the writing desk, very carefully, the way you set down something fragile. She looked at them for a long time. The ship rocked gently. The engine hummed its slow, steady heartbeat below her. The lamp on her desk made a small, warm circle of light in the darkness. After a very long time, Eleanor picked up her own pen. She found a piece of her personal stationery, cream, bordered in gray, her initials at the top. She wrote 3 words. Who are you? She folded it, wrote simply W on the outside, and then sat for a moment, wondering how on earth she was supposed to deliver a letter to someone whose cabin number she did not know, whose full name she did not know, whose face she had seen for approximately 15 seconds in a well-lit dining room. She went to the door and slid it under, into the empty corridor, which was, of course, absurd. She went to bed. She found his reply in the morning, slipped under her door again. Same cream envelope. She was beginning to recognize the paper. It was good quality, old quality. The kind of stationery that smelled faintly of cedar and something else she couldn't name. My name is William Carey. I was a passenger on the SS Eternity's 14th crossing. I boarded at Southampton on the 12th of August, 1887. We are currently on the 15th crossing. The 14th voyage ended on the 23rd of August. I know you are going to ask how I can be writing to you from a crossing that has already ended. I don't have a satisfying answer to that. What I can tell you is that I remember everything. I remember the ship. I remember the smell of the dining room, the sound the engines make at 3 in the morning when everything else is quiet. I remember Margaret Fenn, and I remember what was done to her, and who did it, and why. I am telling you this because you are sleeping in her cabin, and because you have her eyes, and because I am, I think, the only person left who can keep you safe. Please meet me on the promenade deck tonight after 10 o'clock, near the stern. I will be there. William. Eleanor sat with the letter for a long time. She was not, by nature, a superstitious woman. She had been raised by a father who believed in facts and figures,
and the measurable weight of things. She had been educated in London, had read philosophy and science, and had once sat through a 2-hour lecture on rational empiricism without falling asleep. She did not believe in ghosts. She was also, she noticed, slightly short of breath. She folded the letter and put it with the others. Then she put on her coat and went to find the ship's purser. The purser's office was on the main deck, a narrow room that smelled of ink and pipe smoke. The purser himself was a round, efficient man named Mr. Hooper, who clearly preferred numbers to people, but had learned to tolerate the latter.
Eleanor asked, as casually as she could manage, whether he might tell her which cabin a Mr. William Carey was booked into. Mr. Hooper looked at her, then at his manifest, then back at her. "I'm sorry, Miss Ashworth. There is no passenger by that name on this crossing." Eleanor kept her expression very still. "Are you certain?" "Quite certain." He turned the manifest to show her, a column of names, neatly typed. No William Carey. "What about the previous crossing?" she asked, before she could think better of it. "The 14th. Was there a William Carey booked then?" Mr. Hooper's expression shifted, something between discomfort and caution. "I'm not sure I'm at liberty to—" "Please," Eleanor said. Just the one word, quietly. He looked at her for a moment. Then he opened a different ledger, older. He ran his finger down a list. He stopped. "There was," he said, slowly, "a Mr. William Carey, booked passage from Southampton to New York, 14th of August. He paused. "He did not complete the crossing, Miss Ashworth." The ship rocked gently. "What do you mean?" she said. "He went overboard," Mr. Hooper said, very quietly. 7 days out, during a storm. His body was not recovered. He closed the ledger. "It was a very difficult crossing. We also lost a lady passenger. Fever, the doctor said. A Miss Margaret Fenn, in cabin 14, Eleanor said. Mr. Hooper stared at her. "Yes," he said. "How did you know that?" Eleanor smiled, very carefully. "Lucky guess," she said. She spent the day walking the decks. The sea was calm today. Long gray swells, unhurried. The horizon a soft, flat line between one shade of gray and another. A few other passengers were out in their deck chairs, wrapped in blankets, reading or sleeping, or staring at the water with the glazed contentment of people who have nowhere to be for 7 more days. Eleanor walked and thought. William Carey was dead, had been dead since August, drowned somewhere in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean during a storm, and yet letters had appeared under her cabin door in his handwriting, and she had seen a man in the dining room, a real man, solid and present, who had looked at her with those careful, sorrowful eyes, and then vanished without trace. She did not believe in ghosts. And yet, the letters were real. She was holding them. She had read them in good lamplight with full waking eyes. The paper was real. The ink was real. The words were real. Margaret Fenn had been real and had died in cabin 14. And someone, something,
was trying to tell Eleanor something about that death. She stopped walking at the stern rail and stood looking out at the ship's wake, that long, white, churning line stretching back across the gray sea, dissipating slowly into nothing. The ship was always moving forward. The wake was always disappearing. And somewhere behind them, in water that closed over everything eventually, lay whatever remained of William Carey. She stayed there until the light began to fail. Then she went inside for supper. Then she went back to her cabin and waited until 10 o'clock. Then she put on her warmest coat and her gloves, and she went out. The promenade deck at night was a different world. In the daytime, it was a sociable place, chairs and blankets and polite nodding between passengers. At night, with the lights of the saloon behind you and the darkness of the ocean ahead, it became something else entirely. Vast and quiet, and slightly outside of time.
Eleanor walked to the stern, as his letter had said. The wind off the Atlantic was cold and smelled of deep water and distance. The stars were out, a remarkable number of them, the kind of sky you only saw this far from land, and they reflected in the black water below in long, trembling lines. She stood at the rail and waited. For a long moment, nothing. Then, you came. His voice was quiet, low. It came from just behind her and slightly to the left, and Eleanor, who had spent the entire day convincing herself she was perfectly calm about all of this, grabbed the rail with both hands. "I did say I would," she said, when she had recovered herself. She turned around. He was there, the same man from the dining room, standing at a careful distance, 6 feet perhaps, with his hands clasped in front of him and that same expression on his face. Recognition. Sorrow. And now that she was closer, she could see the third thing too, the one she hadn't quite identified before.
Exhaustion. Deep and enormous, like a man who had not slept in a very long time. "You spoke to the purser," he said. It wasn't a question. "I did," Eleanor said. "He told me you drowned." "Yes," William said. "And yet," he agreed. Eleanor studied him. He was, or appeared to be, entirely solid. He cast a shadow. His coat moved in the wind. His breath misted in the cold air, faintly, the way a living person's breath would. "Are you—" she began, and then stopped, because there was no sensible way to finish that sentence. "I don't know what I am," William said, with the air of someone who had been asking themselves the same question for some time and had not yet arrived at a satisfying answer. "I know I was on this ship. I know what happened to me and to Margaret. I know I have been here since then, unable to leave, unable to—" He stopped, looked down at his hands. "Unable to finish." The ship moved beneath them. The stars wheeled slowly. "What happened?" Eleanor asked. William looked up. "That," he said quietly, "is a long story." "We have 7 days," Eleanor said. And for the first time, something changed in his face. Something that wasn't sorrow. Something very small and very careful, like a door opening just a crack to let in light. "Yes," he said, "I suppose we do." They stood at the rail for a long time, side by side, looking out at the dark Atlantic. William spoke slowly, carefully, as if he had been rehearsing the words for weeks, which Eleanor would later think he probably had. He had been a journalist, he said, not a famous one, the kind who wrote long, careful pieces for newspapers that took pride in getting things right, even when getting things right was complicated. He had been in London following a story about a company, a shipping company, and certain things that had happened on certain voyages that the company would very much have preferred to stay quiet. What sort of things? Eleanor asked. Cargo, William said. Things that were being transported in the ship's hold without being declared, and passengers who asked too many questions about it, and then stopped asking questions. Stopped, Eleanor said carefully. Permanently, he said. The wind picked up. Eleanor pulled her coat closer. Margaret Fenn was asking questions, she said.
William nodded. She was a widow. Her husband had died on a previous eternity crossing, the 12th, I believe. The official report said heart failure. She didn't believe it. She had been corresponding with the families of 2 other passengers who had died on eternity crossings in the last 3 years. She was trying to find the pattern.
She found it? She got close enough. His voice was very quiet, and someone on board found out how close she was getting. Eleanor looked at him. The starlight made the planes of his face very clear, the sharp line of his jaw, the shadows under his eyes. And you? She asked. Why were you on this crossing? The same story, he said. Different angle. I had a source, someone inside the company, someone who had been trying for 2 years to get information to a journalist. They had passed me documents. I was bringing them to New York. He paused. I was supposed to pass them to another reporter there, someone who would know what to do with them. What happened to the documents? William was silent for a moment. They're still on the ship, he said. Eleanor turned to look at him fully. The documents that could expose what this company has been doing, she said slowly, to this day, on this ship. Hidden, he said. Before they found me, I had time, barely, to hide them. I didn't know if I'd survive long enough to reach New York. I didn't.
He said it without drama. Simply. A fact. Eleanor felt something tighten in her chest. And Margaret's evidence? Her letters? Her research? Gone, William said. They searched her cabin after she died. Took everything. A pause. Everything they could find. But not everything she had? Eleanor said. Something in his expression told her she was right. She was clever, he said, and his voice changed just slightly on the word clever, as if the memory of it was something he was careful with. Cleverer than they knew. There was one thing they didn't find. Where is it? I don't know, William said, but I have been thinking for a long time. I think it might still be in cabin 14.
Eleanor was quiet for a moment, looking out at the black water. My cabin, she said. Your cabin, he said. Another silence, not uncomfortable. The ship moved beneath them, steady and slow and very large. There is a man on this crossing, William said. I need you to be careful of him. His name? But at that moment, a door opened at the far end of the promenade deck, letting out a bar of warm yellow light and the sound of voices from inside. 2 passengers, laughing about something, stepping out for a last cigarette before bed. Eleanor turned back.
William was still there, but he was looking at the newcomers with that careful, watchful stillness of someone who didn't want to be seen. "Tomorrow night," he said quietly. "Same time. I'll tell you the rest." "Wait," she began. But when she turned back, there was only the wind and the stars, and the long, dark line of the Atlantic stretching away in every direction. And Eleanor stood alone at the stern rail, the cold working its way through her coat, her heart beating steadily, and thought, "Well, this is certainly going to be an interesting crossing." She went back to her cabin and sat at the small writing desk. She laid out the 2 letters side by side and looked at them. Then she opened her own writing case and took out several sheets of her personal stationery, and she began to write. Not a letter to William, not yet. Instead, she wrote everything down, everything he had told her, the company, the cargo, the passengers who had died, the documents hidden somewhere on the ship, the thing Margaret Fenn had concealed in cabin 14. She wrote clearly and precisely, in the way her father had taught her. "Just the facts, Eleanor, just the shape of things. Don't let your feelings make the sentences crooked." And when she had filled 4 pages, she sat back and looked at what she had. It was a story, a real story, the kind that newspapers printed on the front page. She realized, still holding her pen very tightly. She loosened her grip, set it down, flexed her fingers. Then she got up and began to search her cabin. Methodically, quietly, starting with the most obvious places. Under the mattress, behind the small mirror, inside the bed frame, and moving to the less obvious ones. She pressed every panel of the wooden wall. She checked under the writing desk, running her fingers along the underside. She examined the porthole frame. She lifted the edge of the small rug. Nothing. She sat back on the bed and looked at the cabin. Small, neat, blue blanket, 1 desk, 1 lamp. She was clever, William had said, about Margaret Fenn. Cleverer than they knew. Where would a clever woman hide something on a ship? Somewhere they wouldn't look. Somewhere that wasn't obvious. Somewhere that felt like nothing at all. Eleanor's gaze traveled slowly around the room and stopped. The lamp. Not the oil reservoir that had been filled recently. She could smell it. But the base. The heavy iron base that the lamp sat in, bolted to the desk. She crossed to it, crouched down, looked underneath. There was a piece of paper folded very small and pressed flat against the underside of the lamp's base, held in place by a thin strip of wax. Eleanor sat very still for a moment. Then she reached up and peeled it free. She unfolded it on the desk. It was a single sheet, covered in small, precise handwriting, the handwriting of someone accustomed to fitting a great deal of information into a small space. Names, dates, numbers, port records, and at the bottom, 3 words underlined twice. Find William Carey. Eleanor sat in the lamplight for a long, long time. Outside, the Atlantic moved dark and enormous around the ship. The engines kept their heartbeat. The stars wheeled overhead. And Eleanor Ashworth, who had not gone looking for any of this, who had only wanted a quiet crossing and a city where no one would ask her questions about grief, held Margaret Fenn's evidence in her hands and felt something she hadn't felt in 4 months. Purpose. Small and cold and clear as the night air. She folded the paper carefully, tucked it into the inside pocket of her coat, put on her boots, put on her coat, put the coat over the back of the chair beside the bed. Then she lay down,
pulled the blue blanket over herself, and, surprisingly, impossibly, given everything, she slept. The ship carried her westward through the dark, through the deep and patient Atlantic, toward a city she had not seen in 19 years, toward whatever came next. Let that settle around you now. The sound of the ship, the deep, slow hum of the engines, the faint creak of the hull moving through dark water. Eleanor is sleeping. The letters are on the desk. The lamp is burning low. And somewhere on the SS Eternity, William Carey is keeping watch. You don't need to solve anything tonight. You don't need to figure anything out. Just rest in the middle of the story, the way a ship rests in the middle of the ocean, held up by something vast and deep and older than any of us.
The second day passed quietly. Eleanor ate breakfast alone in the dining saloon, watching the other passengers over the rim of her coffee cup with new and careful attention. There were perhaps 40 people on this crossing. Not a full manifest, September being neither the fashionable time to depart nor arrive. Families, businessmen, a retired clergyman who read his Bible at every meal, a young couple on what was clearly their honeymoon, unable to stop touching each other's hands across the table. And one man she had not noticed before. He was sitting near the far wall, eating methodically, toast, egg, coffee, and reading a newspaper that he held very precisely at exactly the right angle to obscure his face, while still, she noticed, allowing him to see the rest of the room over the top of it. Eleanor recognized this technique. Her father had used it. The man was perhaps 50, silver-haired, well-dressed in a gray coat that was slightly too good for a sea crossing. He had the kind of face that was designed to be forgettable, regular features, careful expression, the specific blankness of a man who had spent years practicing invisibility. He was watching her. Not constantly, not obviously, but she caught it twice, a flicker of attention in her direction before the newspaper moved very slightly to cover it. Eleanor finished her coffee, stood, walked back to her cabin without hurrying, sat on the edge of the bed, thought. She had not yet found a way to leave a letter for William. She had no cabin number, no address, and sliding notes under the doors of every cabin on the ship seemed both impractical and alarming. But William had managed to leave letters for her, which meant, she reasoned, that he could find her, which meant she needed to trust that he was paying attention. She took out her stationery, wrote 3 sentences. There is a man on board, gray coat, silver hair, perhaps 50. He is watching me. She folded it, wrote W on the front, set it on the writing desk. Then she went out to walk the decks. The morning was clear and cold, the sea a deep winter blue, and Eleanor walked the promenade deck 4 times, not for exercise, but to think. She had been trained by a father who trusted the motion of the body to unlock the motion of the mind, to solve problems on her feet. Most of the good decisions she had ever made, she had made while walking. The facts as she had them. Margaret Fenn had died in cabin 14 on the 14th crossing, carrying evidence of wrongdoing by the shipping company that owned this vessel. The official report said fever. It was not fever. William Carey had drowned, or been drowned, on the same crossing, carrying documents that corroborated Margaret's evidence. His body had not been recovered. Both the evidence and the documents were now in some form in Eleanor's possession. There was a man on board this crossing who appeared to be watching her. She did not know why. She did not know if he was connected to what had happened on the 14th crossing. She did not know his name. And she was carrying, in the inside pocket of her coat, a piece of paper with 3 underlined words at the bottom. Find William Carey. Margaret Fenn had written those words, probably in the last days of her life. She had hidden the paper under the lamp in cabin 14, where it had waited, through crossing 15, 16, all the way to this one, for someone to find it.
Eleanor stopped walking. She stood at the bow rail and looked out at the blue Atlantic ahead of them, the horizon perfectly clean and empty. Margaret Fenn had addressed her evidence to William Carey, had hidden it where only the occupant of cabin 14 might find it. And Eleanor, who had not known any of these people, who had booked this cabin by pure chance, who had been trying only to go home, had walked into the middle of all of it. She did not believe in coincidence. Her father had not believed in coincidence. She was beginning to wonder if something else was at work. The reply was on her desk when she returned to the cabin. She had not been gone 40 minutes. The door had been locked. She did not examine these facts too closely. I know who he is. His name is Hargrove. He works for the company, not as an employee, as a cleaner. When things go wrong on their routes, he is the one they send to make it right. He was not on the 14th crossing. He is on this one. I don't know yet how they found out about you. Perhaps they have been watching the cabin for every crossing since August, waiting to see if Margaret hid something there. Perhaps someone saw you speaking to the purser. Whatever the reason, he knows you found something. Eleanor, you need to be careful. Don't let him see that you're being careful. William.
Eleanor read it twice. Then she took the note, held it over the oil lamp, and burned it. She watched the paper blacken and curl and fall to ash in the small metal dish she had repurposed for the purpose. Then she went to the mirror above the wash basin and looked at herself for a moment. Her gray eyes, which people had always called serious. Her father's mouth, which her mother had always said was too stubborn for her own good. She straightened her collar, smoothed her hair. Don't let him see that you're being careful. Right. She spent the afternoon in the ship's small reading room, which was just off the main saloon, a pleasant place of leather chairs and bookshelves bolted to the walls, with a good lamp and the smell of old paper. 3 other passengers were there, the clergyman reading his Bible, a middle-aged woman doing needlework, a young man asleep in a corner chair with a book tented over his face. Eleanor selected a novel from the shelf. She had finished the Gothic house story and needed something new, and sat in a chair near the window. She read for 2 hours. She did not see Hargrove. But at 3:30, she looked up from her book to stretch her eyes and noticed something she had not noticed before. A small door set into the paneling at the far end of the reading room, almost invisible because it was papered over in the same pattern as the wall. A service door, probably, for stewards, for maintenance. It was very slightly ajar,
and in the thin, dark gap of it, she could see the toe of a gray coat. Eleanor looked back at her book. Her heart was beating a little faster. Not fear, exactly. Her father had always said she did not have enough fear for her own safety, and she had never been entirely sure whether this was a compliment or a warning. She read another page, another, turned it with a very natural motion. Then she stood, stretched, replaced the book on the shelf, and walked out of the reading room into the main saloon, and from there up the stairs to the promenade deck, and from there back to her cabin. She did not hurry. She did not look back. When she was inside with the door locked, she sat down on the bed and let out a breath she had been holding, quietly, for some time. They met on the promenade deck again that night. 10 o'clock, the same stern rail, the stars back out, brilliant and cold. Eleanor told him about the service door, about the gray coat. William listened without interrupting. He had, she was discovering, the quality, rare and valuable, of being very still when someone else was speaking, of actually listening rather than preparing what he was going to say next. It made her want to keep talking. She noticed this about herself and found it interesting and set it aside. "He's moving faster than I expected," William said when she finished. On the 14th crossing, it took them 5 days to act against Margaret. He's had 2. "Perhaps they're being more cautious this time," Eleanor said. "Or perhaps less." "There's a difference," William said. "If they're being cautious, they want to know what I found before they do anything about it. If they're being less cautious," she paused, "they already know, or they don't care." William looked at her for a moment. "You think very clearly." "My father raised me to," she said. "He thought it was the most useful thing he could give me." She paused. He was probably right. A silence. The ship moved. The stars reflected in the water below, trembling. "Tell me what happened," Eleanor said, "on the 14th crossing. All of it." William was quiet for a moment, looking out at the dark water. "I boarded at Southampton with the documents in a waterproof oilskin case," he began. "I had them sewn into the lining of my smallest trunk. I thought that was sufficient." A pause. It wasn't. Someone searched my cabin on the 2nd day, professionally, which means I only knew because I had left a very precise arrangement of things on my desk and came back to find them slightly wrong. Not enough for anyone else to notice. Enough for me. So they knew about the documents. They knew I had something. They didn't know exactly what. He turned slightly, looking along the rail at the dark sea. "I moved the documents that night, found a better hiding place. I won't tell you where yet, in case Hargrove is more resourceful than I hope." "Sensible," Eleanor said. "Margaret and I had been speaking since the 3rd day," William continued. "We recognized each other, I think, the way people who are both watching a room for the same reasons eventually recognize each other. She was very composed, very intelligent. She had lost her husband 2 years before and had been constructing her case for 16 months. She was not, he said, someone who frightened easily." Eleanor noticed, again, that change in his voice when he spoke of Margaret. Careful, tender, like a bruise that had healed imperfectly. "You cared about her," Eleanor said. "Not a question." "We were friends," he said, "for 7 days. crossing an ocean together, both carrying things we shouldn't have been carrying, both hoping we'd reach the other side. He stopped. Yes, I cared about her. What happened to her?
He was quiet for a long time. The 6th day, he finally said. There was a dinner. All passengers were invited. Margaret didn't want to go, but I thought it was better to appear normal, appear unworried. I persuaded her. His jaw tightened. I persuaded her, and at dinner, someone put something in her wine. The ship rocked very gently. Eleanor held the rail. It wasn't immediate, William said. It presented as a fever. By the next morning, she was genuinely unwell, genuinely feverish, and the ship's doctor, who I believe was not complicit, only incompetent, diagnosed influenza and quarantined her cabin. He stopped. I tried to reach her. I was told she was resting. I was told she was improving. On the morning of the 8th day, I was told she had died in the night. Eleanor said nothing. I went to the captain, William said. I told him what I believed had happened. I had no evidence. They had already cleared Margaret's cabin. The captain was polite, careful, told me grief sometimes caused people to see things that weren't there. A pause. That evening, I was on the stern deck, here, about where we're standing. 2 men came up behind me. Silence. The water was very cold, he said, quietly.
Eleanor looked at him, at his profile against the stars, at the set of his shoulders and the stillness of his hands on the rail. "I'm sorry," she said. He looked at her, briefly, and it was strange, because the expression on his face was not what she expected. Not self-pity, not bitterness, something more complicated, something almost like wonder. "I keep waiting to feel the cold," he said. "I can't feel the cold anymore." He looked back at the water. "But I can feel this, being here, talking to you." A pause. "That's something, I suppose." They met every night after that. 3rd night, 4th night, 5th. The same stern rail, the same stars, the same cold wind. Eleanor in her warmest coat, gloves, a scarf she had bought in London and not yet worn. William in his dark coat that the wind moved but did not, she noticed, seem to actually chill. By the 3rd night, she had told him about her father, about London, about the solicitors and the well-meaning aunts, and the 4 months of answering questions with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She had not meant to tell him any of it. It had simply come out, the way things come out when the darkness is sufficient and the ocean is large enough to hold everything. He listened the way he always listened, completely. "What will you do in New York?" he asked, on the 4th night. "I don't entirely know," Eleanor said. "I have my father's contacts there. Some money, not a great deal. I thought I might find work." She paused. "I used to write, before London. Small things. Pieces for women's journals, mostly, which paid very little and were edited by men who thought I was writing too directly." She said this without rancor. It was simply the world, as she understood it. "You should write directly," William said. "It's not terribly popular. Good writing never is at first." He glanced at her. "The reporter I was supposed to meet in New York, his name is Aldridge, James Aldridge. He writes for the Herald. He's been waiting for the documents since August." A pause.
he would want your story too. Eleanor looked at him. My story, she said. A woman traveling alone, searching a dead woman's cabin, being watched by a company enforcer, corresponding with a drowned journalist. He raised an eyebrow. She was getting better at reading his expressions in the dark. If that's not a story, I don't know what is. Eleanor was quiet for a moment. Are you suggesting, she said carefully, that I walk off this ship in New York with Margaret's evidence and your documents and present them to a newspaper? I am suggesting, William said, that you are perhaps the only person who can. Another silence. The ship moved beneath them. Stars. What about Hargrove? She said.
We have 2 days left in the crossing, William said. I've been watching him. He's been watching you. He knows you found something in the cabin. I'm certain of it now. But he doesn't know what, and he needs to know before he acts. So he'll try to find out? He'll try to take it, William said. More directly. He'll try to search your cabin while you're not in it. Or, he stopped. Or approach me directly, Eleanor finished. Yes. Good, Eleanor said. That's what I want. William looked at her. Eleanor. If he approaches me directly, she said, I can find out what he knows, what the company knows, how much of this they've been able to bury, and for how long. She turned to face him fully. I can make him part of the story. William looked at her for a long time. His expression was, she had gotten quite good by now at reading it, somewhere between admiration and concern. Your father, he said, must have been a remarkable man. He was, Eleanor said simply, and he raised me to finish things.
Hargrove approached her on the afternoon of the 6th day. She was on the promenade deck, in one of the wooden chairs, with a blanket and the novel she had borrowed from the reading room. The sea was rougher today, long gray swells, a bite in the wind, clouds building on the horizon. Most of the other passengers had gone inside. Eleanor had stayed. She heard him coming before she saw him, the particular cadence of footsteps that were trying to sound casual and weren't quite succeeding. He sat in the chair next to hers without asking, set his hands on the arms of the chair, looked out at the sea. Dreadful weather, he said, a voice like a door that closed too softly. I rather like it, Eleanor said, without looking up from her book. A pause. Miss Ashworth. She looked up, met his eyes, gray like the water, careful. She gave him her best version of polite blankness, her London expression, the one she'd worn for 4 months. I'm sorry, have we been introduced? She said. Not formally, Hargrove said. I'm a representative of the White Shore Shipping Company, the owners of this vessel. He smiled. The smile did not reach his eyes. We like to check in with our passengers when we can. Make sure the crossing is to your satisfaction. It's been lovely, Eleanor said. Wonderful. He glanced at her bag, the small one she kept beside her chair and never left unattended. You've been keeping to yourself mostly. First crossing on the Eternity? First, she said. And how did you find your cabin? Comfortable? And there it was. Eleanor turned a page of her book. Very comfortable, she said. Cabin 14. Wonderful natural light from the porthole. I've been sleeping beautifully. She smiled at him.
The smile she'd perfected in London, the one that gave away precisely nothing. I hope the previous guests found it as pleasant. Something moved in Hargrove's gray eyes, very quickly, like a fish turning in deep water. I'm sure they did, he said.
In fact, Eleanor said, still smiling, I found a little note someone had left behind, under the lamp. Isn't that sweet? It must have been missed in the cleaning. She tilted her head. A lady's handwriting. Do you have any idea who I should return it to? The wind moved. A wave struck the hull below them. Hargrove looked at her for a long moment. Why don't you give it to me? He said. I'll see that it gets where it needs to go. Oh, I already posted it on in Southampton before I boarded, Eleanor said pleasantly, to a newspaper contact of my father's. I wasn't sure it was important, but it seemed like the sort of thing someone might want. She stood, folding her blanket over her arm. Now, if you'll excuse me, I think I'll go in before the weather turns. Lovely to meet you, Mr. Hargrove, he said, very quietly. Mr. Hargrove, Eleanor said. Enjoy the afternoon. She walked inside without hurrying, without looking back. Her hands were perfectly steady. Her heart was beating very fast.
That night, she told William everything. He was quiet for a long time after she finished. You told him you'd already sent it? He said. Yes. Had you? No, she said. But he doesn't know that. And it means he has no reason to search my cabin, or, she paused, or anything else. If he believes it's already in someone else's hands. William looked at her. That was either very clever or very dangerous. My father always said those were the same thing, Eleanor said. Another silence. The last night before New York. The stars were different tonight. She could feel the continent somewhere ahead of them. The quality of the air changed. Something warmer and darker on the horizon that might have been the beginning of the coast. William, she said. Yes. What happens when we reach New York? He didn't answer immediately. She had noticed over the past 5 nights that he never answered immediately when the question mattered. He treated words carefully, like things that could break if you handled them wrong. I don't know, he said, finally. I haven't been able to go any further than this crossing. I've been here, on this ship, repeating this route since August. I think... He stopped. I think I've been waiting for something to be finished. The documents, Eleanor said. Perhaps, he said. Or perhaps something else. She looked at him, at the stars reflected in his eyes, or what she had come to think of as his eyes, the eyes of whatever he was, standing at this rail in the dark. Are you afraid, she asked, of what comes after? He considered this seriously, the way he considered everything. No, he said. I think I've been afraid of before, of not having done enough, of leaving it unfinished. He looked at her. I'm less afraid of that now. Eleanor held the rail. The ship moved beneath her, that enormous, steady heartbeat she had fallen asleep to every night for 7 days, that had become as familiar as her own breathing. I'll find Aldrich, she said,
Your contact at the Herald. I'll give him everything. Margaret's evidence, your documents, all of it. I'll write my own account as well."
She paused. "I'll make sure it gets finished." William looked at her for a long moment. "Eleanor," he said. "Yes. Thank you." She nodded, looked back out at the water. After a moment, she said, "Will I see you tomorrow, on the last day?" He didn't answer right away. "I don't know," he said, honestly. She nodded again, let out a slow breath into the cold air. "Then I'll say what I want to say now," she said, "in case I don't get the chance tomorrow." She turned to face him. He was very close, closer than he had been on any of the other nights, she realized, as if the crossing had, by increments, moved him nearer. "You were a good man," she said, "and you did a brave thing, carrying what you carried. And Margaret Fenn was lucky to have a friend like you at the end." She held his gaze. "I'm glad it was me in cabin 14. I'm glad I found her note, and I'm glad you trusted me." Something moved across his face, that door opening wider, more light coming through.
"I'm glad too," he said, very quietly. A long moment. "Good night, William," Eleanor said. "Good night, Eleanor," he said. She walked back inside. She did not look back this time either, but she could feel him there, behind her, for a long while. She did not see him the next morning. She looked, she couldn't help it, at breakfast, scanning the dining room, on the promenade deck, in the places where she had seen him before. No cream envelope under her door. Nothing.
The coast appeared in the early afternoon, a thin dark line on the horizon, and then, slowly, the shape of it. Cliffs and trees and the low smudge of the city beyond. Other passengers came out to the deck to watch. There was that particular atmosphere that always comes at the end of a sea crossing. Excitement and relief and something else, something almost like grief, because a ship is its own world, and the end of a crossing is the end of a world. Eleanor stood at the bow rail and watched New York come toward her. She had the documents in her coat. William's oilskin case. He had told her exactly where to find it, and she had found it, exactly where he had said, in a compartment beneath the floorboard under the bed, which she had not thought to check in her initial search. Margaret's evidence, her own 4 pages of notes, everything. She also kept an eye on Hargrove, who was standing further along the rail, also watching the city approach. He had not spoken to her again since their conversation the previous afternoon. He did not speak to her now.
When the ship finally docked at the Hudson River piers, Eleanor was one of the first down the gangway. The city hit her like a physical thing. The noise, the smell, the scale of it. Carriages and carts and shouting and the cries of vendors. And underneath it all, the particular smell of New York in September, which was hay and river water and coal smoke and possibility. She stopped on the pier and breathed it in. Then she took out the small card she had written the name on 2 nights ago. James Aldridge, New York Herald, Nassau Street. And below it, in her own handwriting, "Tell him William Carey sends his regards." She hailed a cab.
She did not think about William until later that evening,
After she had checked into a modest but clean hotel in Lower Manhattan, after she had met James Aldridge in a coffee house on Nassau Street and watched his expression change slowly as he read through the documents and Margaret's evidence and Eleanor's own account. He looked up at her when he was done, a serious man, mid-40s, with ink-stained fingers and eyes that had seen a great deal and had not been made easier by any of it. "Carey sent you?" he said. "Not exactly," Eleanor said. Aldridge looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked back at the documents. "He's been missing since August," he said. "I know," Eleanor said. "He's not missing anymore." Aldridge didn't ask what she meant by that. Perhaps he understood. Or perhaps he was the kind of man who knew when to let a sentence be. "This is enough," he said, quietly, looking at the documents. "This is more than enough." Eleanor nodded. "It needs to run," she said. "All of it. Margaret's story, William's story." She paused. "And mine." Aldridge looked at her. Then he nodded. "Come back tomorrow morning," he said. "Bring your notes." She was walking back to her hotel through the lit streets of Lower Manhattan, the September night soft and warm after all that ocean air, when she stopped. She wasn't sure why. She stood on a pavement on a street she didn't know the name of yet, surrounded by the sound of the city, horse hooves and voices and the distant clatter of a railway. And she looked up. The stars were there. Fewer here than on the ocean, drowned out by the gas lamps. But there, if you looked. She looked. She stayed like that for a long moment. Then she said quietly, to no one in particular, or perhaps to the stars, which felt like the right direction. "It's done, William." The city moved around her. The gas lamps flickered. Somewhere nearby, a piano was playing through an open window, something slow and old and slightly mournful. She waited. She felt, rather than heard or saw, a warmth, very brief, just behind her shoulder, like someone standing close on a cold night, like a hand that had almost touched hers and then didn't. Gone in a moment. Just the city. Just the night. Eleanor Ashworth straightened her collar, shifted the documents more securely under her arm, and walked on. She had work to do in the morning. The story ran in the New York Herald 12 days later. Front page. All three names in the opening paragraph. Margaret Fenn, William Carey, Eleanor Ashworth. The White Shore Shipping Company denied everything for 4 months. Then the other families came forward. And then the documents were verified. And then the captain of the 14th crossing, who had been polite and careful and had told William that grief sometimes caused people to see things that weren't there, was asked to testify before a Senate committee. He told them everything. It was, the paper said afterward, one of the most significant maritime fraud cases of the decade. Eleanor Ashworth wrote about all of it. She wrote about it clearly and directly and without apology, and the editors who published her were the kind who didn't think directness was a problem in a woman. She wrote it all. She only ever left one thing out. And now, let the story rest. Let the city fall quiet, and the ocean fall quiet, and the long gray Atlantic settle back into its own deep silence. Margaret Fenn rests now, and William Carey rests now.
Somewhere out on that dark water, in the stars reflected in the waves, in the deep place where the tide keeps everything eventually. And Eleanor is at a desk somewhere in New York with good lamplight and a pen and another story to tell. And you are somewhere safe and warm and far from the cold sea. And there is nothing left to solve tonight. Nothing to carry. Nothing to figure out. Just your breath. Just the dark. Just the quiet turning of the world. Let your body be heavy. Let your mind go soft. The story is finished. And you can sleep now. Sleep. End of the wreck of the SS Eternity. Thank you for listening. If this story carried you somewhere quiet tonight, stay there as long as you need. There will be more stories. There will always be more stories. But for now, rest well.